epidermis, and dermis. And so now the epidermis has 5 sublayers, right? So what are they generally called? Stratum. You guys know your, do you know a mnemonic, or do you know your stratum? So from the apical surface down, what would this be? Corneum? This is representing that layer, that stratum that's not always present. This is lucidum. Where would you find this stratum? The soles of your hand. I mean, the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands. So, and then next one would be granulosum, spinosum. So if you identify any of these tissues on the exam, you want to make sure that you put the full thing. If you just put granulosum, you're going to get marked wrong. It needs to be stratum, granulosum. Yeah. If you go from the base up, there's a boys say girls like chocolate. Use that one. You can do any one you want. Bullshit, grandma loves cookies, whatever. So if I were to ask you which strata would you have mitotic activity?
The B one.
Stratum basala, that's correct. Where would you find cells that attack pathogens? And what would they be called? That are in the epidermis. Okay, so there's a cell called a dendritic cell. You guys remember those?
Yeah.
Okay, those are found in stratum spinosum, and they fight pathogens that enter the skin. It's like our first line of defense. And then, what's the protein that these cells are filled with? Keratin. The cell sacrifices something in order to fill with keratin. What does it sacrifice? Its nucleus. And where does that happen? When do these cells actually die?
Like the site that's body, so they can start getting stuff together.
Granulosum. Stratum granulosum, and that's the reason why it has that name, is because it's starting, the nucleus is actually falling, it's dissolving, and that's why you see a lot of granules and stuff. It's because it's the nucleus that's coming apart. And then so once it gets to corneum or lucidum and thick skin, it's already dead and it's filled up with keratin. Is the epidermis vascular or avascular? It's avascular. In order for it to receive nutrients and oxygen, it needs to go through. It needs to get it through diffusion. So your dermis is where you would get where you find it being vascular. Okay, so now the dermis is divided into sublayers as well. What sublayers is that? Reticular layer and papillary layer. And okay, well, let's backtrack one more thing. If you were to look under the microscope and identify this tissue, what would you say? Your skin.
Stratified squamous?
Stratified squamous epithelium. You would have to write all that down. If you just put stratified squamous, you would get a mark wrong. You have to identify that it's epithelium. Okay, so now that we're on the topic of tissues, what type of tissue would I find here in the papillary layer? Areolar? If you put areolar on the test, you're going to get marked wrong. Loose areolar connective tissue. You can abbreviate connective tissue, but you have to put loose areolar. And then in here, this region would be, your reticular layer would be made of what type of tissue? Dense irregular connective tissue. If you put irregular connective tissue, you get marked on. Dense irregular connective tissue. We also have this region. What is this region called? Subcutaneous, also known as hypodermis. Is that part of the skin? No. Good. It's not part of the skin. Hypodermis sounds like it's part of the skin, but it's not. The only two layers of the two main layers of the integument are the epidermis and the dermis.
Now the subcutaneous, is that where most of the adipose is kept?
So you're gonna find two different tissue types in the subcutaneous layer. You're gonna find adipose tissue and what else?
What was the question?
You're gonna find loose areolar connective tissue, right? I mean, I'm sorry. Oh, I just gave the answer. Yeah, adipose and loose areolar connective tissue.
You
So-
have to put loose areola.
You have to put loose areolar connective tissue. Okay, so I think of like loose areolar connective tissue like layers of lasagna. You know, like the sauce that you have to put between the different layers. So you have areolar, loose areolar, and then you have dense irregular, loose areolar again, and then adipose. See how it's like separating the layers? That's how I remembered it. And then, so if someone's really obese, they're gonna have a lot more adipose, but if someone's really lean, they're gonna have more what? Loose connective, yeah. What else? Okay, so now let's go to the sensory organs. What are these?
Oh,
You sure?
Anybody? Meissner's what? Corpuscle, also known as
touch.
tactile. Tactile. You need to know both names. So Meissner's corpuscles or tactile corpuscle, and they sense light touch. They're only found in the papillary layer of the dermis. Okay, only. So these right here, those are not Meissner's because they're not in the papillary layer. These are actually called Merkels, and they sense shape. The way I remember these ones is like I think of Mexican Merkels. No, that's another one. So these are just Merkels, so and they sense shape. Now Pacinian corpuscles are these green ones right here. Under the microscope, they kind of look like an onion, and they also have another name. What is their name? Lamellated corpuscles, correct. And they sense what?
Pressure.
Pressure. We also have another one. These ones. These are called Ruffini, and they sense stretch. So now let's. What are these? Erector pili muscles. What type of muscle is this? Smooth muscle. Is smooth muscle voluntary or involuntary? It's involuntary.
It makes the hair stand straight up.
What other muscle in our body is involuntary? There's one more. Heart. So which is our only voluntary muscle? Skeletal muscle is the only one that we have control over. This portion is known as what? Shaft. And then this region. What is this? The hair follicle. What about this? Sebaceous oil gland. Don't confuse this for a sweat gland because it's not a sweat gland. It's it secretes an oil. And why would we need it to secrete an oil? What does it do?
It's body temperature.
Mm-mm.
Keeps hair flexible.
It keeps the hair. It keeps the hair. How'd you say it?
Flexible.
Oh, flexible. Yeah, because like if it wasn't oiled, it would break off. So now let's get to sweat glands. So these are your sweat glands, right? Well, this is representing one type of sweat gland. How many types of sweat glands do we have? 2. What's another name for a sweat gland? Sudoriferous is correct. And there's 2 different types. And what are the 2 types? Apocrine and merocrine. You guys know the difference between apocrine and merocrine?
Apocrine is the one that stinks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then American is in that one to the surface.
Mhm.
Because then that's just like.
Don't they both want to
They both go to the surface. However, apocrine needs a hair follicle in order for its substances to secrete out to the surface. So actually here, you don't see apocrine glands. You won't see them here. because its ducts would have to attach here to the hair follicle in order for its secretions to come up.
All those are just
Merocrine, yeah, go directly straight to the surface.
So the apocrine is what?
They also serve different purposes.
The one that gives, like, if you think apocrine armpit, like that's what gives your sweat smell.
Yeah, all the fun areas. And they do different functions. So like Merocrine, their ducts go directly to the surface, and what they do is they secrete sweat in order for temperature regulation. What happens is when our body gets hot, in order for it to retain homeostasis, it needs to cool down the blood. So we have vasodilation, which allows our blood circulation to get more blood closer to the surface. Because when you evaporate water, water has a high specific heat, and it absorbs a lot of water for it to in order for those hydrogen bonds to break off. And okay, so so it cools the blood. That's all you need to know. And then so that's that. Bulb. Yeah, I think I got everything. Any questions?
Yeah, what's that again? Something about chocolate?
Okay. Boys say girls like chocolate. Okay, make sure that you understand that these two layers represent the same layer, stratum corneum. These two represent stratum lucidum, and then these are all singular. Okay, because it looks like there's more. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, the fingerprints. And your epidermal ridges are actually your papilla in your papillary layer.
This one's called something, right?
Well, this is actually representing stratum basala, the blue part.
That's the boy.
I know
Got that one right.
And this is saying girl like chocolate. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, so see these bumps right here? These are your dermal papilla. One of these is a papillae, and then papilla, plural. But these are what actually makes your fingerprints. Any questions on this? You guys are good?